Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Sharon. I'm on the board of the Arts Council of Windham County, and I've also been involved with the working group to put together the guidelines and application. And I use she, her pronouns.
I'm Chrissy Lee, also she, her pronouns. Also a board member with the Arts Council of Windham County and part of the working group that put together the proposal. Chrissy Lee.
Thank you. Sharon Fantel. Hi. So we are going to kind of run through a little bit of what is in the guidelines and application. I don't know how many have had a chance to look at the materials yet. So some of what we're going to cover tonight is detailed more explicitly in the guidelines and application. So we'll kind of go through some of these areas quickly, or relatively quick, not too quickly, but just to also leave more time for questions and any kind of conversation. And so I'm going to be covering some of the overview and the mission of the Town Arts Fund, and Chrissy's going to get into some of the mechanics of the fund as well. And before we get started, I just wanted to ask, maybe just show of hands for who's here, who in this group has submitted a proposal or something of this nature before? All right. Who in this group has an idea for a project in mind and is definitely planning on applying? Okay, cool. Just yeah. Just to get an idea of who's here, and anyway, so feel free to interject at any point. Basically, just in brief, how did we get here? Voters approved the resolution to allocate $15,000 to create a Town Arts Fund at Brattleboro's representative town meeting in March. Starting in the spring, a working group came together of roughly 15 plus people with various backgrounds and interests to craft the guidelines and the application process. Some people were heavily involved with that. Other people came in to review the application or to make suggestions. So we've had really a cross-section of participants. And then in August, we brought the guidelines and the application to the select board, who unanimously approved the proposal and the allocation of funds. And so we find ourselves here now. So kind of past, present, future, while the Town Arts Fund itself is new, the idea of establishing municipal contribution to the arts has been part of the town master plan for several years. Really, this is a new resource, but it's one that has grown out of people's past and ongoing vision and effort and their commitment. So the launch of this resource is one that we're hoping is building off existing resources in Brattleboro, which is the creativity and the people who are here. And we want it to continue to grow and impact Brattleboro. The fund itself aims to be adaptive and responsive. So by offering these funds, we're joining other communities throughout the state and region and elsewhere that dedicate funds to the arts, public funds for the arts. But because this is a first year for us, we're really hoping to learn a lot as well and to continue to adapt it as the community needs. Anything further with that? No? Okay. Moving forward, the Arts Council of Windham County, so we're a couple members from that board, in partnership with the town, will administer the funds, the application selection process, and the disbursement of the funds. The working group, as it's existed thus far, is going to transition to more of an advisory board. We'll meet on a quarterly basis to guide and refine the program. For anyone who is not applying, but if you think of people in your orbit who you think would be a good fit for an advisory, in the advisory capacity, please share their information with us or let them know that there's an opportunity there to be involved. And as I mentioned, this is kind of our first year pilot year. So what we learn both from the process and the range of proposals that come through will help us adapt and respond to the community needs for future years. Really sort of the main gist is this fund is intended for capacity building, community building, and collaboration as a resource for the town, and its intention to feed other resources that are already here. So before I kind of go into some stuff, this is where you can find more information on the guidelines, FAQ, application form. Those are available on the Arts at Windham County's website, artswindhamcounty.org at TAF. There are paper copies at the Municipal Center on the first floor, and
There are a couple of paper copies that are floating around the room right now, too.
yes. So, as mentioned, so the Town Arts Fund provides awards of up to $5,000 to enable the development and presentation of creative projects that contribute positively to the greater community and the vibrancy and diversity of Brattleboro's arts and cultural landscape. So, as mentioned, it's really the focus being on building capacity, engagement, and access. And so the intention going into the creation of this fund is that it helps to foster collaboration between different entities, individuals, organizations, that it helps to increase access and affirm art's role in community building, and that there's a spirit of inclusiveness both in the creation and participation with various projects. Let's see. So in particular, the Arts Fund endeavors to support community-focused creative projects that engage directly with or investigate creative solutions to social and quality of life issues in the community. So really focusing on that social component, things that are really important and being discussed in town. To highlight or enhance Brattleboro's unique qualities and assets. That can be various spaces and locations, kind of its physical, unique qualities. Projects that involve engagement, community building, that are participatory or collaborative, are accessible to the community at large and inclusive of diverse audiences, and importantly, would not otherwise happen without this funding. So projects really can employ any form of creative practice, are open to any phase of career or level of experience, and first-time grant seekers are welcome and encouraged to apply. So really, again, the aim is to be as open and accessible as possible in creating this fund, and primarily we're agnostic about the range of projects, just that projects themselves are really speaking to the mission of what TAF is doing. We're also using the term artist very expansively, so however you consider yourself as an artist, that can also include designers, culture makers, or heritage holders, so pretty broad in terms of that definition. And the range, again, of projects are really wide open, whether it's something performative, site-specific, a publication, workshop series, storytelling project. The whole scope is really open to what people want to bring to it. As far as grant amounts, a total of up to $15,000 are going to be awarded in the January 2020 cycle, and individual grants of $500 to $5,000. The number of grants is not predetermined, so it will depend both on the number, quality of proposals, and the panelists will really be looking at the selection criteria, really the values of the fund as they're going through and looking through applications. Some other key dates to note. So the application period is already open. There's this information session. We have another one scheduled for next Thursday, the 14th in the morning at the Hatch Space. There are some postcards by the front if you want to take one with you or let other people know about that. On January 10th, applications are due by 4 p.m. and those can either be emailed or dropped or mailed to our P.O. box. Chrissy will talk about that. We'll notify applicants in February 21st, and then the project period is between March and October 31st. So hopefully that's a span of time that works for a range of projects and applicants. And also, I know I kind of breezed through that. It was just kind of more to get to the key points. But if there's questions at any time, please interrupt, or we'll talk about them at the end too.
All right, thanks, Sharon. So Sharon's kind of gone through a high-level overview of the program and the mission. I'm going to start to get into some of the nuts and bolts and mechanics of how the fund is going to operate, the application process, and the selection criteria and selection process. So Sharon mentioned we wanted to cast a pretty wide net in terms of who is eligible to apply for the fund, sort of a broad definition of artists, artists of any discipline, emerging artists. I'd also add established artists, artist collectives, cultural organizers, creative organizations, and businesses at any phase of career or level of experience. I want to stress too that one of the focuses of the fund is to try and encourage collaboration between artists and creative organizations and other entities within the community. And so we're also opening the application to any individual, collaborative, or community-based organization that's interested in pursuing creative solutions to community issues or investigating public place or space. So really, any individual organization that is interested in a creative project that aligns with the mission of the fund is eligible to apply. We also ask that proposals include at least one applicant, either an individual or an organization, be a resident or based in Windham County. So what kind of projects will be funded? Projects have to be based in Brattleboro primarily. We want the geographic focus of the work to be in Brattleboro, which is not to say we wouldn't be open to projects that have some regional aspects to it. And so if your focus is primarily Brattleboro, there can also be some connections to other communities in the region if that makes sense for your project. Funded activities may include but are not limited to exhibitions, publications, public events, public and place-based art, film screenings, the ongoing work of an existing venue or collective, or the founding of a new venue or collective. This is just a sample of the kinds of things that would be eligible for funding under the program. And as Sharon mentioned, it's sort of a wide open field. So these are just some examples, and we welcome other ideas. Funded expenses can include things like artist fees and stipends, contractor fees, materials and supplies, venue rental, and marketing and promotion costs. You may include funding for equipment if the acquisition of that equipment would result in a significant efficiency, if it's required to initiate a new program or project, or if it would greatly enhance an existing program. Some of the things that will not be funded include prizes, tuition, and scholarships, fundraising events, purchase of artwork, food and beverages, programs promoting a particular religion, commercial businesses, nonprofit, and for-profit ventures without a strong community benefit, projects that have already taken place and are looking for reimbursement, and again, projects that are not primarily based in Brattleboro. So once you've gone through the eligibility requirements, and all of this is covered in the guidelines document, and you've determined that your project is eligible for funding, how do you go about applying? We've put together what I think is a fairly straightforward application form. We really didn't want to make this too onerous for applicants. It has 4 sections. The first asks for applicant information, the second asks for information about the project, the third asks for information about your budget, and then the fourth gives you the option to add supplemental materials. So I'm going to walk through those 4 sections and kind of give a little bit more detail about what kinds of responses we're hoping to get. So part 1, under applicant information, this is pretty straightforward. If you are applying as a group, we ask that you specify a lead applicant who will be the primary point of contact for your application. We ask that you list all your collaborators and then provide us with contact information, email and phone, and then web and social media if that is relevant to your project. Yes?
If I'm representing a collective entity, do you really want 21 people's names, or do you just want like the 3 lead people?
I think if you can winnow it down to the lead people, that's totally fine. And I'll speak a little bit more about how we want you to describe yourself if you are coming from a group or a collective. Yeah. So the second part of the application is project information, and this is really where the meat of the application is. The selection panel that's going to be reviewing applications is probably going to be most interested and spend the most time in this section of your proposal. So the first question we ask, part A, is we ask you to tell us about your project. You have to include a project title, a description of what the resulting work will be, and an estimated timeline of creation. I also encourage you to include as much detail about the project as you can fit within the word limit to try and really paint a picture for the selection panel. At the same time, there's a 1,000-word limit. You're not required to write up to the word limit. If you can describe your idea in 500 words, that's great. Provide as much detail as you need to convey your ideas. But we encourage you to also to be concise if you can, recognizing that there could be a high volume of applications that we end up reviewing. I also want to acknowledge that different projects may be coming forward at different phases of development. So there may be, on one hand, like an established program that's looking to expand in some way through the Art Fund, where they have more of the details of their proposal and their program already fleshed out. We may also be seeing some proposals where it's really just sort of the seed or sketch of an idea. And I don't want people to feel deterred from submitting an application in that case. You don't have to have every single detail about your project fleshed out in this application. Provide as much detail as you can, and then also indicate what this funding is going to enable you to do. Part B, explain how your project addresses the mission of the fund, and in particular the criteria listed below. So this is your opportunity to really make the connection between your project and the criteria and the mission of the fund. And the criteria we've listed here are focus on community and quality of life issues. So we're looking for projects that address specific community challenges or social and quality of life issues. Projects that speak to qualities, conditions, and assets that are unique to Brattleboro, and projects designed to affect positive change in the community. Collaboration, participation, and inclusion is the next criteria. Looking for projects that encourage collaboration and community building and between and among cultural practitioners, community members, and/or community organizations. Projects that encourage public participation in the development or execution of the project, and projects that are accessible to and inclusive of diverse audiences and the community at large. And I want to pause there just to note that you're not required to address all of these criteria in your proposal, but I will say that it's an opportunity for you to strengthen your proposal by trying to address as many of the criteria as makes sense for your project. And so if you have, for instance, a project that is addressing a particular community issue, but there isn't an element of, say, collaboration or public participation as part of it, you might want to consider, is there a way that that can be built into your program to really try and bring your project into greater alignment with the mission of the fund? Because that's the sort of thing that the selection panel is going to be looking for. The last criteria is innovation, capacity building, and equity. So the project enables innovative creative work and contributes to the diversity of Brattleboro's arts and cultural landscape, elevates the voices of unknown or less visible artists and cultural organizers in the community, and likely would not be possible without this funding. I want to encourage you to speak to the criteria in your response to this section. So try to be as explicit as possible. If you are talking about quality of life issues, then use the language quality of life issues as sort of a signal to the panelists that you've read the criteria and you're making that connection. At the same time, don't just regurgitate what's in the criteria. Be authentic to your project. You know, we want this to really be in your own voice as much as possible. And then part C is tell us about yourself and your project team. We ask that you include a brief bio for the participants on your project. If you are applying as a collective or an organization, you can include one bio that kind of covers everybody, or if it makes sense to call out specific participants, you could also have individual bios as well. I want to stress that these bios should be relatively brief. We don't have a word limit on this because teams could be of varying sizes, but we're not looking for like a full resume and CV for every person on the project. We want to know the information that is relevant to this particular project. What are individuals bringing in terms of skills and experience and interests within the scope of this proposal.
Yeah, and I think you just want to think about on the other end for people who are reviewing the proposal or any supplemental material, just what is most pertinent to the project, and is 10 pages necessary, to kind of give a demonstration, or is like a couple pages of material, if you're including any at all, might that be a little bit easier potentially for any kind of panel to look at and digest. So
the third part of the application asks for a detailed budget, and so we've included a budget worksheet where you can list out your anticipated eligible expenses and sources of income, including sources of income outside of the Town Arts Fund grant. We've sort of pre-populated this with some different categories in terms of different expenses you might see on your project. You don't have to use these categories if they don't make sense for your project, so you're welcome to edit this and customize it so it works for you.
You might address this, or might have already addressed it, but so it's not necessarily important that the Town Arts grant be the sole funder for this project. You could have a project where you're seeking $2,500 from the town, and you have $5,000 from private donations already.
Yep,
Okay.
Absolutely. And that's actually sort of the next piece in the budget, where we'll ask for a little bit of description if you are seeking other funding sources. You're not required to have other funding sources or matching grants, but you're welcome to. And part of what we want to understand is what is the Town Arts Fund money going to support, and then what are these other funding sources helping to produce in your project. We also want to know whether or not these are grants that you have already secured, or if they're pending application, and what impact it would have on your project if you didn't end up getting that funding. And then the last question under budget is an opportunity for you to describe if there are any particular challenges that you have faced in securing funding for this or similar projects in the past. So this is really an opportunity, if it makes sense, for you to make a case that this is truly a project that would not happen without Town Arts Fund support. This is also a place where if there are other circumstances or details about your budget that you can't really spell out within the space of the worksheet, you can just provide us with additional narrative within that section. And then the last part of the application is optional supporting materials. You're welcome to attach up to 10 pages of additional materials to strengthen your application. That can include things like work samples, links to examples, portfolio, past work. You can include letters of reference and support, which is a really nice way, particularly if you have a collaborator, a partner, a project mentor, to bring other voices into your application and to really give them an opportunity to express their excitement about the project and talk about what they are bringing in their capacity. You might consider including applicant resumes if that feels relevant, or any other materials that are going to help enhance your proposal. I would say you're welcome to include these supporting materials, but more isn't necessarily better. So really consider whether or not what these particular materials are adding to your proposal, and whether it's adding something that's different from the other narratives that are already included.
But no one will be penalized for not including these materials. It's really more if it adds value.
So a couple of tips for writing your proposal, and some of these are things that I've already spoken to. The first one's fairly self-evident, but follow instructions. I'm always surprised when people don't, and things get missed, and we would hate for proposals to be disqualified because they didn't provide the information that we needed. Make sure that your proposal fits the intentions of the program, so go through and review the criteria, ask questions if you're unsure about anything. Related to that, speak to the selection criteria, but be authentic, and I think I've kind of covered that ground pretty well. Think of your project as an investment and the panel as investors. So one way you might think about your project is, or this grant program as a financial transaction. And what you want to try and convey through your proposal is that your project is a worthwhile and wise investment. And you can do that by really conveying to the panel why you or your team has the capacity and the skills to bring this project to fruition, and what the impact of that project is really going to be. Establish urgency. So consider the questions, why me, why this, and why now? So really try and make a case for yourself and why your project should be selected among other projects as a way of kind of grabbing the attention of the panelists. Keep it readable, keep it simple, and within the word limit. And then lastly, take advantage of support services. We're here to help. Myself, Sharon, other members of the Town Arts Fund Advisory Committee are here to be a resource for all of you to answer questions about the application, about the guidelines, the mission of the fund, and also if there are particular resources or supports that you need to fulfill your application or to assemble a team or find collaborators, that's something that we would like to help with if we can. These tips were cribbed from a tip sheet that was put together by Forecast Public Art, and I don't know if it'll work for me to link out to it. Maybe not.
We can pull it up after.
Yeah, we'll pull it up afterwards. But this is a helpful reference for you if you want to come back to it. So we've included the link there if you want to read through. There's a couple other tips in there that were also useful. Once you put all that together, you can submit your application by email or by mail. Email to townartsfundbrad@gmail.com or mail to the Arts Council P.O. Box, which is written in the application. We ask that applications be submitted, and that means emailed or postmarked by January 10th at 4 p.m. So once we have received all the applications, how will projects be selected? We are going to assemble a 7-member panel that will review applications and make recommendations based on the criteria that we've talked about. The panel will include artists, community organizations, Brattleboro residents, and representatives from the Town Arts Fund Advisory Committee, the Arts Council, and the Town Arts Committee. And I just want to clarify that even though there will be representatives from the Arts Council on the selection committee, that Sharon and I will not be on that selection panel. We're here to be an unbiased resource for you. So you're not going to get anywhere trying to curry favor with us tonight.
And we're really there too as administrators moving forward to really help with a lot of the logistics. And then, as we mentioned, applicants will be notified at late February of the panel's decisions, with the intention of being able to initiate projects as early as March 1st. So I just kind of wanted to close with this in terms of the selection process, just to reiterate. These are the criteria that the panelists are going to be using to evaluate proposals. These first 3 I spoke to earlier are really about how you make the connection between your project and the mission and the criteria of the fund. The 4th criteria is about the overall quality of the proposal and the ability to execute. But I just wanted to sort of emphasize that the focus and the bulk of what we're looking for is the quality of your ideas, and how much in alignment they are with the goals of the program
Is this a project that is really trying to contribute something for the betterment of the community? Is it trying to bring in collaborative elements and public participation? And is it introducing something new into the ecosystem of arts and culture in this community?
I would only just add, in speaking about the overall quality, again, it's not that a proposal itself needs to be completely polished, even if you're starting with kind of a sketch of an idea. But it's really kind of what is that idea? How does it speak to these criteria? And what is the plan that you imagine moving forward? Not that, again, everything is like you've written completely up to the word limit, or what you're handing forward is a complete, polished package. That's not how it will be evaluated.
I'm curious if anything would lead you to believe that the town or the panel that's selected would have problems if the issue that's being addressed could potentially be seen as political in nature.
From our conversations, with the town so far, they know that especially in that focus on community and quality of life issues, that's been a really strong component of the grant. And so, that's really open to what that brings up for people and the kinds of projects or dialogues, or, that could be about homelessness, that could be about the opiate crisis. There are a lot of things that are political in nature. And I think it's just a matter of what is the sensitivity to those issues? What are you trying to do with those issues? And how, again, does it lead to kind of that community benefit? Are we just raising issues that we know are there, or is there something that we're trying to do creatively and collaboratively to not solve them per se, but to sort of bring them into a common space? I think they're supportive of that. I don't think anyone is necessarily shying away from the political possibility of what those issues might be for people. But if you have additional questions about it as you're conceiving of things, again, we're here as a resource to kind of figure it out.
So again, we're here to help. You can contact us if you have other questions after this session at our email at townartsfundbrat@gmail.com. In the guidelines document, there is a full FAQ, and there are probably some questions in there that we didn't touch on in this presentation. So it's worthwhile to go back through and take a look at the FAQ questions in there. And with that, we want to reserve some time for additional questions, or we could even kind of break out and have a little discussion time. But I wanted to say thank you to all of you for coming out. I really hope that this presentation has been helpful for you, and moreover that it has gotten you excited about the fund and excited about submitting an application. We're really, we're excited about the vision for what this fund can do in terms of enabling all of you to creative visions for the community and put them into action. So I look forward to seeing what kind of proposals come forward. Thanks. Yeah, so we'll open up to questions. I also wanted to make sure, if it's not already if it hasn't gone around, there's a sign-in sheet at the front, and I just want to make sure that we do get everybody's information. Like if you need to leave early or anything, just make sure you sign in. We are going to email out a follow-up to this session. BCTV is recording this, so we'll include a link to the presentation, a link to this slideshow, so that you can reference it or pass it on to other people who you think might be interested
Is this
in the
all
fund.
also, I assume, found on some form of Arts Council Windham County website, or?
We'll have it on our website,
And
across
the Facebook
social
page,
media.
yeah. All the things.
Yeah.
Thanks. Are there any other questions? Jessica.
So if there's a project that's already happening, but additional funding could enhance the equity, access, collaboration. So yes.
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 Nodding,
Yes.
Yes.
The answer is yes.
And just in case that question didn't get picked up for the recording, The question was if you have an existing project and the additional Town Arts Fund money would enable you to increase access, inclusion, participation, and any of those other qualities of the fund. Yes, the answer is yes, that would be eligible for funding, absolutely. And I think being able to specify that in the application, this is the program as it is, and this is what the additional funding is going to allow, and bring it into greater alignment with the fund, that would be great.
I've got 2 questions.
Yeah.
First, do I understand correctly that if it's an individual or an organization or a collective, they're going to be judged on the same criteria?
Yes.
And then if an organization is applying, has programs that are operating, and wants to set up a financial aid fund to create better access to that, is there anything including that kind of proposal?
I think scholarships are not scholarships and fundraisers are not included, but I think in terms of increasing access, I guess like that can mean different things for different organizations and individuals. So if it's not so much a fund that's being established, but some means of outside of that, sort of increasing some access, or if it's event-based, sometimes that means low and reduced cost tickets, or some kind of underwriting aspect in that partnership to be able to support some other organization's participation. If you have, as you're kind of developing it, if you have more questions about that, we can figure that out. But it cannot be a specific scholarship necessarily, or a fundraiser, but I think there still is some room for how you think about access.
Is it possible, can we also supplement arts honorariums?
Yes. So the question was, can you supplement artists' honorariums with the fund? And again, as long as it's really working with the criteria, that is one of the things that it aims to do, because we also know that we want people to be supported for the work that they're contributing, and that's always a big challenge for artists. And as we think about capacity too, if this can be a tool for showing the value of you want to pay people for the time, for their energy and effort and collaboration. So that's definitely up there for allowable expenses.
I would even add that if we saw a proposal that was asking of collaborators' time extensively in terms of the creative process, and didn't compensate people for their time, that would also kind of come up as a red flag, or we might come back to you and ask you to revisit that part of your budget proposal.
If an organization has diverse needs that tick all the boxes for the criteria, do you think that it's better to submit one proposal that covers all of them, or maybe break them out because they're significantly different from each other?
So you're saying like if one of those diverse needs was a particular program.
Right, let's say if funding some marketing and also doing some improvements to the physical space.
Yeah.
I think with either of those things, what I would hope to see is some kind of encapsulating message of how those improvements and those investments are going to have some community, some public benefit,
Sure.
and address the criteria of the fund.
Absolutely.
And I think if there's a blanket, if there is some sort of a broader statement that you could be making, and those programs kind of fall under, those expenses fall underneath it, then you could bundle it together.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, I would just add that it's not an operating fund per se.
Right.
So there's a little bit of that, like it's fluid, I guess, in terms of how people might approach the need and the project, but just that, again, it's sort of all of these other qualities that are really, we're asking people to be thinking about. And if some of those operating expenses relate to that in a very clear way, then that's one thing, but it's not of itself simply an operating fund. So that would be the distinction, that there needs to be that community component and so on. So
your statement just now seems to make a distinction between, there's something in here that says that funded expenses may include ongoing work of an existing venue or collective, but operating expenses may not.
well, I guess
So can you
expenses, like operating expenses as they relate to that ongoing work, or program, might be one.
Can't use it to pay the gas.
Yeah, that's
But if
it's not your physical plant, fund.
But like if you wanted to expand the space to include a community wall for art, that could be included. But you
Yeah.
can't use it to pay your gas bill or your water bill.
Right. Yes, that's helpful.
Unless possibly you're not open during the winter because of fuel costs.
And then
to
you're
be open during the winter, having that funding.
Well, then you got to make that case
Then
in the budget so that it's clear that it's not like, okay, this makes sense because this is kind of ticking all those areas. So
Like a gas was.
again, I mean, I think from
Water bill, how's that?
from a panelist side, I mean, what we've sort of put together are really in the guidelines are like, here might be some examples of what you could do, or here might be some kind of budget items. I think what you don't want is for a group of panelists to be guessing, making assumptions because there isn't enough information, or it just looks like one thing. So it's really about making that case. And all the notes in the budget area are designed to do that, because sometimes the number itself can't really convey that. It's kind of matching it to what you've been talking about in your proposal, but then any kind of description in the notes will kind of get at this is what we're really looking at here, and then that will clarify for a group of panelists so that they're not wondering, wait, you said this, but all we're seeing here doesn't really seem to connect. That's the thing that we just wouldn't want people to lose out, because that wasn't made more explicit, those needs.
Does that matter?
We haven't predetermined the number of proposals. That is a decision that the selection panel will make depending on the range of proposals that come in and how they match up against the selection criteria.
So do you have a cap amount that you have to
$15,000
allocate?
is the total amount from the town, and the maximum amount for an individual grant is $5,000.
So it would be fair to say that there's a minimum, as the bottom ceiling of 3
Right,
that will be
yeah,
awarded,
sure.
and above that, it's
Yeah.
it's not
Right.
determined.
But it's Amber and then Josh.
I'm curious about the definition of collaborator and how that might differ from a partnership. So if you have potential partnerships with organizations who are willing to support you through networking or marketing or venue space, that is different from a collaborator who's like the architects or what are helping you actually craft what. I've seen you say yes, and I feel like.
Well, I mean, I would say sometimes partnerships feel they can be kind of like that deeper investment, maybe sort of to what you were mentioning, kind of in your illustration of partnerships. Sometimes collaborations can take all kinds of forms. It could just be sort of light collaboration, or really you're working with people very closely on a project. So I have a hard time defining necessarily what is a collaboration, what's a partnership. I think it's just like who are the players and what's their role is kind of that might give a better indication of like how invested are they, or is this kind of collaboration light, you know, which is fine in and of itself if that's sort of what also makes sense in the scope of the project. So
I think the fact that I was about to give a contradictory definition for collaborator and participation is an indication that it's like it is a hard thing to define. But I think as long as you are clear in your narrative about what the role is, and whether it's you know, a high degree of collaboration where someone is really like a co-creator with you versus someone is just like providing some in-kind support by offering you space or offering you some sort of operational support. Just as long as that's clear, you can call them collaborators or partners, whatever makes sense.
I was just clarifying, so this is $15,000 per year allocated by the town, presumably from
The general fund.
the general tax or whatever fund, and then this is to be replenished indefinitely each year, $15,000 per year.
We have to continue to request the funding, and so we've already, because even though we just got this approved, the budgeting cycle starts in the fall, and so we have already submitted a request to re-up the $15,000 in the coming year. So our intention is to try and kind of hold that $15,000, at least as we're piloting the program and starting to build it up. There's also opportunities that we've talked about to try and bring in other funding sources so that in time the fund could grow to be more than $15,000 or, you know, morph and adapt as it needs to.
Barring like another Great Recession or anything, it seems like there's enthusiastic support from the powers that be,
yes,
at least for the immediate future, assuming.
yeah, they don't want this to go away. I mean, there's interest in really seeing
So
kind
it's
of the
not like-
benefit accrue.
It's not like we have to fight tooth and nail each year I mean, you still have to advocate for it, but
Absolutely.
Yeah.
it's not like a stretch to expect this to be a regular annual thing.
That's
for
the
now.
That's the hope.
That's the hope.
That's the hope for
It is-
now, and
yeah.
I think it's we're making the case for next year, and the process by which it's being incorporated into the budget is different for this cycle than it was last year, where that deadline, we had missed that deadline. I mean, we had just become new board members of the Arts Council sort of as some of that was happening. So really our tenure on the board kind of coincided with the approval really at representative town meeting. But this year, you know, the idea is we've already requested the same amount of funds. We want to hold that steady for a few years and work to replenish and build on that. Josh.
So when you go back to the town for the budgeting process this coming fall, what is the story that you want to tell about the success of how the money was used?
You mean this fall, or then once we've gotten 1 year?
Once you've gotten 1 year.
1 year in. Well, we're hoping.
That's what I was going to touch on, if people are confused on like where the money's coming from. I've been a town meeting rep for 3, 6, or 9 years, depending on how you look at it. But the Brattleboro budget, there's a whole bunch of money in it, and then it's allocated through town meeting day. And this past Arts Council of Windham County, which is a completely, correct me if I'm wrong, you fully volunteer board.
Yes.
They came to town meeting day and asked for money, and they were granted $15,000. And so the hope is that we go back next year and do that exactly again. And it could easily be wiped out, it could easily be taken away, and that might be allocated to other things.
Oh,
Or it can be
I had a
it can
slight.
be increased.
I had a slightly different understanding, which is, I'm going to apologize for interrupting, but this past year, I think that in the fall budgeting process before representative town meeting, there was a proposal advanced to actually put a line item in the budget for the Arts Fund.
And it didn't pass.
And it didn't go through the select board in part because there wasn't enough detail in the proposal, and it didn't come together, I think, in time for that to get into the budget as it would be presented to the community at representative town meeting. So instead, it was raised as a motion from the floor to add a resolution that then had to be voted on by the town meeting reps. And so there was a little bit more controversy, a little more like debate, I think, about it, and attention put on it because it was an add-on and it wasn't already in
and now
the budget.
We've already submitted it as the budgets are being requested from different entities across town. Like they already have the $15,000 request will be included in the budget and not be sort of raised from the floor.
Yeah.
So
it
still has to be approved as part of the larger budget, but it's not going to come up as this add-on. And I know that there was some debate at town meeting about a number of add-ons.
It still needs scrutinized.
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
The whole goal is to do really well
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
time.
And so back to
Yeah.
Jessica's question, I mean, so at town meeting this year, some of those projects will have just started, potentially. So, you know, I think it's not like there will be necessarily tons of documentation at that point. But at that point, we will have an idea of what those projects are that we can share there. You know, we do want to work with applicants, you know, throughout the kind of implementation period to kind of be resources to help share, you know, project updates and materials and so on to kind of increase sort of that visibility for the projects. And we will be kind of making somewhat regular updates, you know, to the town and select board about how things are going. And we've been really working hard since the working group kind of came together to build trust and clarity in terms of what the fund itself is trying to do, who's involved, and, you know, to really kind of lay out a process that feels clear. So I think thus far we've managed to do that, and that's going to be the work that will continue through the implementation period, so that there's information being shared about what people are doing.
I would also add that by next fall's budgeting cycle, there will be products, there will be work products and outcomes to show, and part of what we are asking of any of the grantees is to be doing some documentation of their work, and the Arts Council has some capacity to support that, but to ensure that we are sharing the successes, that we're telling the story of what the impact of these projects is in the wider community, and in the hope that by the time we come back to the select board in the fall, that we have a really compelling story to tell about what the outcomes of the fund were.
I assume that by accepting a awarded grant, you're also inherently accepting the responsibility of some sort of end reporting. Is there sort of a required follow-up financial / narrative piece, I assume?
We will ask for a very simple kind of descriptive report from applicants at the tail end of the project. Yep, any kind of documentation that you've been keeping to kind of include in that, as well as a budget report. So again, really trying to remove as much of the onerous process. Like there are some grants out there where you are really required to submit a lot of materials up front, even during and at the end, and that's not what we want to do. However, we also want to be able to capture, you know, from applicants' perspective, you know, what worked well, what were they excited about, how did the project go, and, you know, to be able to be accountable for the money that's been allotted for the budget report.
Well, thank you so much.